By late 1971, tensions between India and Pakistan had reached a breaking point. On both sides, naval commanders knew that control of the Bay of Bengal would likely decide the outcome of the war in the east. This was the crown jewel of India's Eastern Naval Command, the INS Vikrant. As a massive aircraft carrier, it provided the air power and reach that guaranteed Indian naval supremacy in the region. Pakistan realized that to challenge India in the east, they had to remove the Vikrant from the equation. To do it, they deployed their most capable underwater asset, the PNS Ghazi. The Ghazi was a diesel-electric submarine, formerly the U.S. Navy's USS Diablo. It was the only vessel in Pakistan's fleet capable of the long-range, deep-water endurance required to strike India's eastern coastline. On November 14th, the Ghazi departed Karachi on a top-secret mission. It had to traverse a 4,800-kilometer route around the Indian peninsula to the Bay of Bengal, where its crew would hunt the Vikrant and lay mines. If the Ghazi's stealth mission succeeded, India's naval dominance would be neutralized before the official declaration of war. The hunt began with a signal. Indian intelligence intercepted transmissions suggesting a Pakistani submarine was already moving toward the eastern theater. The Indian Eastern Naval Command responded with a critical maneuver. They secretly moved the INS Vikrant out of its known position, repositioning it to a classified secure harbor far from the expected combat zone. But hiding the ship was only half the plan. To protect the carrier, the Navy decided to lure the Ghazi into a trap by manufacturing evidence that the Vikrant was still stationed elsewhere. To create this illusion, the Navy generated a surge of false radio traffic and placed massive logistical orders, including huge quantities of meat and vegetables, to suggest a carrier-sized crew was stationed at Visakhapatnam. The Ghazi took the bait. It arrived here, off the coast of Visakhapatnam, and began patrolling the shallows to search for the carrier and begin its mine-laying operations. By feeding Pakistani intelligence data that confirmed their existing expectations, the Indian Navy gained control over the submarine's movements. On December 3rd, the war officially began. At the Visakhapatnam harbor, the mission to protect the coastline reached its most critical moment. Around midnight, the Indian destroyer INS Rajput began navigating out of the harbor channel for a patrol. As the Rajput cleared the breakwater, the crew spotted a violent, swirling disturbance in the water. It was the signature of a massive object, plunging into an emergency crash dive. The Rajput responded instantly. It swung into position over the dive site and launched 2 heavy depth charges directly into the submarine's suspected path. Moments later, a massive underwater explosion shook the coastline. All contact with the Ghazi was severed. Within minutes, Pakistan's most dangerous underwater asset had been neutralized in the dark waters outside the harbor. By morning, the surface was littered with debris and life jackets. Divers eventually located the wreck of the Ghazi on the seabed. All 93 men on board had been lost. While the Indian Navy officially credits the depth charges from the INS Rajput for the kill, the exact sequence of events that night remains a subject of historical debate. This schematic shows the theories: damage from external depth charges, or a catastrophic internal explosion from its own mines. A third theory suggests an emergency dive caused it to strike the seabed, triggering a fatal detonation. Regardless of the specific mechanical cause, the loss of the Ghazi secured the eastern coast. This allowed the INS Vikrant to operate safely, enforcing the naval blockade that helped bring the war to a close. The PNS Ghazi was lost while hunting a ship that was never there. It was a victory won through strategic deception and swift, decisive action.